Hello everyone and welcome to my Wild Rift tier list for patch 6.2, 6.2a and the brand new season 18. In patch 6.2 we got one of the biggest patches that we have ever seen for Wild Rift, changing a lot of the items in the game, adding these new Yordle themed items which most of them are very strong at the moment. We also got rework to most of the crit items, which has changed a lot of the builds for a lot of AD carries and also champions like Yone and Yasuo. And also we got a big shift up in the tempo of the game as well. Games are now a lot quicker than they have ever been before. Most games that I've played had not even gone above and beyond 15 minutes. Most games are ending before 15 minutes now, which of course made some champions stronger and some champions weaker. Of course, in this tier list, we'll go through every single role. I'll talk about each champion. I'll let you know if they've gotten stronger or weaker, depending on some of the new items and also the way the tempo of the game works. But as always, if you enjoy the Wild Rift content on this channel, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know down below what champion you've been having the most success on so far in Season 18. And of course, if you want to check out the best builds for Wild Rift, as always, you can check out my website, Wild Rift Fire. It has now been fully updated for patch 6.2a with all the best builds, especially for champions like Yone and AD carries as well. And speaking of Yone, you can see there's 2 Yones, 2 Ambessas, and 2 Aatrox at the top of the tier list. And I think that's going to be a running theme from what we're going to be seeing in both the Baron lane and also in the jungle. But let's start off in the Baron lane. Ambessa is a champion that was already strong in the previous patch, but honestly got a lot stronger with items like the new Yordle's Death Stance. Eclipse also got buffed as well, which is a lot very powerful for Ambessa in the Baron lane. She did receive a bit of a nerf in patch 6.2a. I did think it was going to shift a little bit, but I did think that she was still going to stay in the S+ tier because the champion just works so well. And if you only nerf one of her abilities, it's just not going to be enough. She now does a little bit less damage on her first ability, but her overall kit is still very powerful. With the build now, as I mentioned, with Eclipse being buffed, with Yordle's Death Stance as well, making her pretty much unkillable, she is a great carry to play in the top lane. Aatrox as well, again another champion that was already very strong the last patch but just got even stronger as well. The new Yordle Soroda's Grudge as well, also very good for a lot of these bruisers, since you now apply anti-heal when you hit enemy champions 3 times with abilities, but also just the huge amount of damage and the slow effect that you get as well is just very powerful. But a lot of you will be surprised to see Yone in the S+ tier for both top lane and in the jungle. And I'll explain to you why Yone is sitting up here. It's basically because of the reworked crit items. Yone is one of the best champions, I think, now in this patch that builds crit items. The reworked Bloodthirster is great for Yone, gives him now attack speed, which he already got before if he built Bloodthirster, but it was only when he was above 50% health, but now he gets it at all health points. You now also have the lifeline passive for Bloodthirster, making him pretty much unkillable. Navori is actually one of his best items now because it increases the damage of his abilities. So his first ability, his second ability, and his ultimate now get increased damage as well. And because of the Navori Quick Blades passive, when you hit a crit with your basic attacks, you lower the cooldowns of your other abilities. Yone's first ability counts as an auto attack. So you're dealing so much damage now with Yone, and you also now have a lot of survivability with Bloodthirster in there, and also you build Yordle's Death Stance a little bit later on as well. But Navori now gives attack speed. You build Mortal Reminder as the third item. That also now gives attack speed. So you have a lot of attack speed with Yone, a lot more damage than what you did before, and also the built-in survivability with Bloodthirster and Yordle's Death Stance. And he is one of the best carries to play right now in Wild Rift. Moving down into the S tier, Singed got a nice buff in this patch with the Yordle Liandry's, very powerful item at the moment in the current meta. You'll see a lot of champions that are very high up on the tier list that use Yordle Liandry's Torment. The true damage effect is very powerful. The burn effect is now a lot stronger in the early game, which is great because the tempo of the game, as I mentioned, is a lot more fast paced now. So Liandry's you don't need to build as a second or third item because you don't need a shit ton of basically ability power to be able to make this item useful. So Singed is in the S tier. Camille also in the S tier, got a buff I believe just before 6.2. Definitely helped her out a lot with her base AD going up. But in general, Camille is still a very strong champion. You can build Hullbreaker on her if you want to. I think in general, Hullbreaker is not that strong of an item. It's a pretty okay item, pretty mid item, but I think it could definitely maybe warrant a buff. I think people are building Hullbreaker on the wrong champions as well, because Hullbreaker, you need to build on champions that actually have a lot of attack speed and auto attack a lot to benefit from the passive. But yeah, Camille in general, still great split pushing, still great in team fights as well. I'm pretty sure will always be useful because of her ultimate being able to lock down an enemy champion. Poppy's still a very strong tank. Tanks in general got Yordle Sunfire, which is just in general going to give you a lot more damage. So you can go for the Heartsteel plus Sunfire combo, which is very powerful at the moment in the current meta. Poppy as well as the champion is still very strong during laning phase, great during team fights. Warwick as well in the barrel lane, still a very good barrel lane champion and also still a very good jungler. Your trading during the laning phase is very, very strong. Again, with Yordle's Death Stance, making him pretty much unkillable, which is very nice. But in general, Warwick has a very nice time in the barrel lane with his sustain and also his single target damage on his first ability. Volibear still very powerful as well in the top lane, was already very powerful in the last patch, just was super tanky, very difficult to kill because he has his AoE auto attacks, but also his shield on his third ability, making him pretty annoying. Fiora is a champion that I was tempted to put in the S+ tier because Fiora right now is very difficult to lock down, and if you play against a very good Fiora, then it's very difficult to play against, and you probably might just get completely run over. But I have just kept Fiora in S tier for now because of the skill involved to be able to master Fiora. She's not as easy as someone like an Olaf or a Poppy or someone like Singed, for example. She requires a lot more skill to be able to pull off, so that's why I've just kept her in the S tier. But if you're strong with the champion, I definitely recommend to pick it up in this patch because she is very strong at the moment in the meta. Olaf's still very strong in the top lane as well. Bit of a unique pick in the top lane, but honestly surprises a lot of people. Honestly surprises me as well. There was multiple times where I got very surprised with Olaf's healing when he's low on HP and also his shield on his second ability. You do have to be very careful when you play against this champion. Even if he's low on health, make sure that you have enough damage to burst him down before he can heal back up again. Wukong still very powerful, again in the barrel lane, still a very strong champion, has a lot of sustain with grasp and also his first ability, and his first ability also does a lot of great single target damage. Gnar focused more on his mega form. Most of the time you don't really want to fight when you're in mini Gnar, but you do have that range versus melee matchup in the top lane, which makes Gnar a very safe barrel laner to play. And when it comes to team fights, as I mentioned, Mega Gnar being very, very powerful at the moment, you can pretty much win team fights by yourself with Mega Gnar. Jax still very strong again. Yordle Death Stance is now going to be built with Jax as an item. You'll see most of these bruisers now build Death Stance because it's a lot stronger, because it deflects both physical damage, or it denies both physical damage and magic damage now, so it's good against pretty much all sources. Most of the time you still want to build the item if you're against a lot of AD champions, but even if you're against like 2 AD and 2 AP champions, the item's still great to go. And in general, just this great split pushing, pretty easy champion to master, and is very, very strong. Ornn, as I mentioned with Poppy, in terms of tanks, the Heartsteel plus Sunfire combo is still very powerful. Ornn as a champion still does a lot of damage as well, offers a lot of crowd control, offers damage, offers tankiness, offers engage in team fights. Very strong champion to play. Shen with split pushing, also pretty strong at the moment. With teleport being added into the game, you can now run teleport on Shen, and you can go ultimate into another lane. You can ulti in the mid lane or ulti in the top lane or bot lane, wherever you want to use your ultimate for. And then if the enemy top laner is pushing the lane, you just teleport back to the lane and you'll be able to defend it. So you get a big massive impact in the team fight, but then also you can teleport as well back to your lane so you don't lose that many tower platings. In general, with tower platings being weaker, some of these champions in the barrel lane are going to be able to push a lot quicker and do a lot more damage to towers, which means that you'll be able to get more tower platings and also just get more gold for yourself. Rumble, I did move down from S+ tier to S tier. I do think the champion is still very strong, and I still think the champion has a lot of carry potential, but I honestly think that the champions in S+ tier are just way far and beyond the rest of the champions at the moment, with Ambessa, Aatrox, and Yone. All three of these champions are very strong, so I have moved Rumble down. He's not the easiest champion to play as well. You know, his ultimate is such a big factor. But if you misplace his ultimate, or if you put his ultimate in the wrong position, then you're losing out on a lot of damage. But did get a nice buff with the Yordle's Liandry's, so it's still going to be a great champion to play. In the A tier, Teemo, of course, got Liandry's again, and also Yordle's Infinity Orb. Both of these items are very good for Teemo. One of the most annoying champions, I think, to really play against. I think Teemo is just a really big bully in the barrel lane. I do think Teemo can be probably better in the mid lane, because the mid lane is a lot shorter, and it means that you can escape a lot easier. Teemo is one of these champions that you can gank very easily because he is very squishy. He does die very quickly. But if you play Teemo in the mid lane, you can still poke and you can still be a nuisance. But at the same time, you can also roam around and be a nuisance as well. And you can also go back to the tower much easier. Yasuo, again, with the crit buffs, Yasuo is becoming a lot stronger in general. You do still build Grasp on Yasuo. You can also still build Grasp on Yone if you want to as well. Or you can go for Lethal Tempo, which you'll see in my Yasuo mid lane build a little bit later on. But Yasuo with the crit items definitely was, definitely helped him out a lot. For a long time, Yasuo has built tank. But now finally with the buffs that he got to crit and a lot of the changes that happened, trying to reduce the tank stats, but also buff his damage stats, Yasuo now finally builds crit with the new items like Bloodthirster, Infinity Edge helping you out, and also Mortal Reminder. So a very strong champion to play as well. KO is still a bit of a hit or miss champion for me. Actually, a lot of people at the moment, a lot of players that I've been watching as well, and players that I've been seeing in high elo with Kayle are now building AD Kayle with just how strong the crit items are. Bloodthirster, as I mentioned, with it being very powerful at the moment, you can build into above 100% crit rate as well, and you do quite a lot of burst damage with Kayle. But again, I do think that this champion, if you're against players that understand how Kayle works, so if you play Kayle top lane and the enemy top laner has a wave pushing underneath the tower, and if it's before level 5, it's the easiest tower dive you will ever get. And it's really about punishing Kayle, putting her behind early on. If people don't understand this and you just leave Kayle to farm up, then she'll be very powerful, which is why at the moment in China she has a very high win rate, but that honestly is completely fake in my opinion. I don't think the champion is like you pick and it's an instant win. You still need to know, what you need to do during lane. You still need to know how to play around the melee form. Wait until you get level 5. But also you just need to make sure you don't get towered over and you don't get punished a lot. Kennen with Yordle Infinity Orb, still a very strong champion to play, both in the mid lane and the barrel lane. Very, very powerful with the ultimate. Also with Protobelt, being able to reduce the magic resistance of champions as well. So you already built Protobelt before. It was kind of like Protobelt or Stasis. But you Protobelt in now, use your ultimate, and your ultimate's going to do crazy AoE damage. Set is still a decent champion. I still think that he has a lot of carry potential and he's very difficult to lane against. You can build Hullbreaker on Set as well, but in general, as I mentioned, Set Hullbreaker in general is not that strong of an item. Main reason being is that the stats that you give, the stats that you had yourself from the previous Hullbreaker have been removed. So you don't gain stats yourself. You just gain the HP and the AD that the item gives, but it makes you a lot squishier as well. But Set in general, pretty decent champions, can still be played. Irelia with the buffs and also with Yordle's Death Stance coming in, helping a lot of her damage. Irelia, again, still a pretty decent champion to play in the barrel lane. That's why she sits in the A tier. Dr. Mundo as well, as I mentioned, Heartsteel plus Sunfire makes Dr. Mundo very tanky. The only downside with Dr. Mundo at the moment is Dr. Mundo is very good against AP champions, but a lot of the meta at the moment is a lot of AD champions with crits. So that's why Dr. Mundo is sitting in A tier and not S tier. Very strong tank to play, scales and does a lot of damage, but he does well against a lot of AP champions, but that isn't really the meta at the moment. Darius was still very good champion to play. Stridebreaker has helped him out a lot in this meta to be able to chase down champions, help with his resets, help with auto attacking and chasing down enemy champions. very strong champion to play right now, Darius. Riven as well, also a pretty decent champion to play in Baron lane, is actually better in the jungle right now than the Baron lane, but Riven Baron lane can still work very well with Eclipse and with the high mobility that she has. Tryndamere is a bit of a sleeper pick at the moment, I feel like. I was tempted to put him in S tier, but I haven't played him yet, but I've seen him a few times really pop off, and I've seen Tryndamere top lanes be a really big nuisance, again, because of the new crit items coming in. Magnetic Blaster especially being a pretty good item now for Tryndamere to help him with split pushing, because he does more damage to minions. Also, the item now gives attack damage, which is very good for Tryndamere, and they can build other items as well, like Phantom Dancer, which has gotten a lot stronger. Of course, Bloodthirster as well, and a lot of these items now give attack speed, so it's just going to give Tryndamere even more carry potential. Nautilus in the Baron lane, also still very good. Since the buff that came in with Nautilus, buffing both his third ability and also his first ability, Nautilus Baron lane has been viable and is still a very good champion to pick if you want an alternative tank to play up there. Renekton's still pretty decent. You would think that Renekton would be in the S tier because he is a early game bully and he's an early game champion. But honestly, I just think the champion doesn't do enough damage at the moment. I think that there is still probably needs a few buffs to get him to that state where he is that early game bully. He's kind of been struggling ever since the durability patch. He hasn't been able to use his early game power to his advantage, so that's why he's staying in the A tier. Akali, Yordle's in Infinity Orb, also a very good item for her, as well as Proto Belt, but it's still a pretty difficult champion to play in the early game. You have to farm up, you have to wait until you get a few items, and you have to make sure that you join team fights, which is going to be a bit difficult. You know, you have to join team fights with Akali, so you might lose a few minions, you might lose a few tower platings, and also Akali doesn't have the best of times against all these Baron lane champions. It's much better in the mid lane, in my opinion, than the Baron lane. Mordekaiser again, Yordle's Leandri's Torment, going to be an item for Mordekaiser. Very strong ultimate in the game, being able to isolate any champion that you want to. You can isolate the enemy AD carry. The only downside is that Mordekaiser kind of struggles to kill these champions at the moment. You know, if you use your ultimate on an AD carry, the AD carry has Bloodthirster. It's going to be very difficult to shut them down, and other items as well that is going to be able to, you know, deal a lot of damage to Mordekaiser. So he's going to struggle a little bit, I feel like, in this meta. With trying to ultimate like the AD carry, you might have to just default ultimate the support now and just take the support out the fight, try and one-shot the support, and then go from there. So before, Mordekaiser could just ultimate the ADC and just take down the ADC, but now I don't think that's the case. Nasus and Garen, two very easy champions to play, but two champions that can be easily kited. I think with so much crowd control in the meta at the moment, so much sort of survivability that a lot of these crit champions, a lot of these AD carries have, with Yordle's Death Stance as well, it also means that you kind of struggle against these bruisers. Even though these champions are both very easy to play, they're both pretty decent scaling champions as well, they are not that strong at the moment. I would kind of avoid them most of the time, but they are pretty easy to play, so you can still default to them if you need to. You need an easy champion to play in the Baron lane. And Gwen got a nice buff with Nash's Tooth in patch 6.2. Still does a decent amount of damage. I still think Gwen can be a great carry at the moment. I think with just AP champions in general at the moment, they're a lot weaker than AP champions. You know, if you look at S plus tier and S tier, for example, there isn't a lot of AP champions, only like Singed and Rumble, which benefit a lot from Leandri's, but the rest are all either tanks or AD champions, same in S plus tier. So in general, in terms of AP champions, they just have gotten a lot weaker in this patch. Speaking of AP champions, Ryze in the Baron lane is no longer really a pick. It was a pick really when Ryze came out, but now it's slowly falling out of meta because the damage is not really there anymore. Before, when Ryze's early game damage was actually pretty decent, you were able to poke out a lot of these melee champions, but now it's a little bit difficult. Still a decent champion to play. You know, you can still play him, especially in the mid lane. You can still play him top lane if you want to, but you might have a very difficult time. In terms of the weaker tanks, we have Malphite, Maokai, and Sion. Now, you might be thinking, you know, Malphite, one of the best counters to AD champions in the game. Yes, he is, and the meta is very AD centric at the moment, but Maokai doesn't really offer too much compared to other tanks. You think of other tanks at the moment that are in the game, you think of champions like Ornn, for example, Shen. All these supports offer a lot more. Dr. Mundo as well is also a lot more unkillable than Malphite. Even Nautilus Baron lane, I think, is better at the moment than Malphite because it offers more in a team fight. Malphite, you just use your ultimate into a fight and then you just pray that your team can do enough damage. Yes, you're going to be very tanky, but you're not going to be able to do as much in terms of crowd control or maybe survivability as well. And also very much struggles in the early game as well to try and push enemy champions underneath tower and try and roam to make you, you know, really impactful. Same with Maokai as well, not really used in the Baron lane anymore, kind of struggles a little bit with not enough healing at the moment, unfortunately, and just the build right now not really fitting in. And also Malphite is just a little bit weaker because his build is more centric around building armor like Iceborne Gauntlet, when the meta right now is more to do with Heartsteel and a Sunfire Aegis combo, which Malphite doesn't really build. Sion as well, I think a lot of people getting baited by picking Sion, to be honest with you. As I mentioned, I don't think Hullbreaker is a very good item at all on in general, but it's not very good on Sion because he doesn't auto attack a lot, and also you don't get armor and magic resist. So I think people getting baited by Sion Hullbreaker. In general, I don't think the champion is very strong. Every time I see a Sion in my game, all they do is just play inting Sion, like they never actually use the champion to its benefit, joining team fights and actually using your crowd control and being a big tank in the front line. But at the moment, he doesn't really do that. You know, just the champion just tries to split push, tries to end the game. If he doesn't, then pretty much game over. Urgot in general just doesn't do enough damage. Urgot has been pretty weak for quite some time now. We kind of need another buff to Urgot, to be fair. Not really good in the Baron lane, doesn't really do too much, doesn't really split push, doesn't really do too much in team fights. It's pretty weak. Jace as well, also a champion. Even though we got Yordle's Dustblade, it's not very strong on Jace. He doesn't really benefit a lot from the invisibility because he doesn't jump in and assassinate as much as other assassins. But in general, Jace is pretty weak. Vladimir, a lot stronger in the mid lane. You have a shorter lane. You can survive a lot easier. But Vladimir in the Baron lane, I would completely avoid because you can just get jumped on by any of these bruisers and take a lot of damage and actually be bullied in the early game. And Pantheon, better in the jungle than the Baron lane. Same reason as well. You can't really do a lot of damage in the early game and you get bullied out by any of these other bruisers. Moving into the jungle, I've already spoke about the S plus tier already, but I'll quickly explain why these champions are still very good in the jungle. And Bessa, of course, even after the nerf, her jungle clear speed is still very powerful. She's still one of the best junglers to play. She has anti-crowd control on her second ability. Her ultimate is one of the best ganking tools in the game. She's very powerful, does a lot of damage, and is also pretty unkillable. Aatrox as well. I would say Aatrox is more of a difficult champion to play compared to like Ambessa and even Yone. You have to know when to jump in. You have to know when to use a certain sweet spot at a certain time. And you have to know when to dash in to actually hit your sweet spots. But once you understand a little bit of the basics of Aatrox and knowing when to use your abilities and when to hit champions in the sweet spot, this champion does so much healing, does so much damage, and is absolutely crazy at the moment in this meta. Absolutely ridiculous at the moment. One of the best junglers to play for sure. Yone as well, I mentioned already in the top lane, but crit Yone, very powerful. With him now getting a lot of attack speed from items, you got attack speed boots, Novari Quick Blades gives attack speed, and Mortal Rider gives attack speed. It now means that you can go Conqueror in the jungle, or you can even try and go for Fleet Footwork. But with Fleet Footwork, it does increase your jungle clear speed ever so slightly, but you do lose out on a lot of damage. But Yone, with Conqueror, being able to heal a lot more and do a lot more damage, and also you have enough attack speed in your kit to be able to spam your abilities that are going to deal more damage as well. His jungle clear speed, I have to say his first jungle clear speed is very, very slow though. You just want to farm. Think of Yone as like old Neela. Well, Neela's still very strong at the moment. Think of Yone as Neela, for example. Like Neela is a champion that wants to farm up, get to 2 or 3 items, and then join team fights. That's exactly what Yone wants to do. Not very strong at ganking. Can be decent at times with ganking, but most of the time you don't really want to gank. You just want to make sure that you farm up, get your 3 crit items, and then you're really powerful at that point. Rammus, one of the best champions to play right now to counter the meta. I spoke about Malphite a little bit with how he builds a lot of armor, but he doesn't really benefit a lot from a lot of damage or a lot of crowd control. Rammus is the complete opposite. Rammus is one of the best junglers to play right now. Counters a lot of AD champions. Honestly, if you're against like 4 or even 5 AD champions, you could just pick Rammus and be completely unkillable. The champion does a lot of damage. It makes a huge impact during team fights. His ultimate is very good as well. Rammus, very, very strong in the current meta. Warwick jungle also still very good as well. You build more of an aggressive style when you're playing Warwick jungle. You try and build maybe a little bit more ability power with items like Riftmaker or maybe Awakened Soul Stealer. Try and be more of a carry, but his ultimate, very powerful. You don't even need to hit the first part of his ultimate to be very strong. You could just you know, use your ultimate as a dash, then auto attack afterwards, and you still stun them. You do a lot of burst damage. You're a really great champion, really great carry to play. Lee Sin did receive a buff, which was a little bit scary, to be honest with you. I don't think Lee Sin really deserved a buff. Luckily, the buffs weren't really that big. They were more to do with cooldown, base health in the early game, and a few other things as well. Base shield on the second ability. No damage buffs, luckily. If they were damage buffs, I would be very scared. And also, I'd be very tempted to put Lee Sin in the S+ tier. But with him just getting a few little buffs here and there, he still stays in the S tier. He is still a very strong champion to play, though. Again, one of the champions that are very hard to master. But if you understand the basics of Lee Sin and if you know how to carry with him, he can easily be S+ tier. Very, very strong champion. Jarvan's still very strong as well. People might get baited to build him like one-shot Jarvan, but that build doesn't really work anymore. If you build him more utility-based and more bruiser-based with like Trinity Force, the new Yordle's Death Stance, he does a lot of damage, but also he survives a lot of damage as well at the same time, making him very powerful. Lilia still very strong as an AP option in the jungle with Liandry's Torment, with Yordle's Liandry's Torment now being more of an early game item. You now build this as a first item for Lilia, and you build that into Riftmaker, making her a very, very strong champion to play in the current meta. Wukong also still very good in the jungle. Again, you build in more of a bruiser now than one shot, because so many of the bruiser items are very strong right now, like Trinity Force and also Death Stance. You can also still build Sorelda's Grudge as well. On all of these bruisers, really, you can still build Sorelda's Grudge. You know, Sorelda's Grudge is not really an assassin item. You can still build these on bruisers and they still become very effective. But Wukong, still very strong in team fights. Stronger clear speed is also very strong. Nunu, probably one of the only tank junglers really left in the meta. I mean, I don't really call Rammus really a tank, to be fair. I mean, I guess you got a Mumu as well. Rammus is a tank, but he's just so strong, you know, in this meta in general that it doesn't, like, he's basically a counter pick. Rammus is like the counter pick, but Nunu is like the tank that you can pick in most scenarios, to be fair. Same with Amumu as well, but Rammus is like the counter pick to AD champions. Nunu is very strong in general against melee champions because he has a lot of crowd control. His ultimate can slow as well. There are a lot of strong items that he can build now. You can also build Sunfire as a first item now for Nunu, so you're going to be able to deal a lot more damage. Before, you built Searing Crown to deal more damage with your abilities, but now with a new buff to Sunfire Aegis, that becomes a lot better item. Vi also very strong at the moment. Her lockdown is very powerful. Again, you'll see these bruiser champions, a lot of them build in Trinity Force plus Death's Dance, sorry. Building these items. Vi with her lockdown as well, very strong jungle clear speed and very good in general. Olaf also very strong right now. If you're against a lot of crowd control, you can just pick Olaf and completely run them down. You do a lot of damage. You also take less damage now thanks to Death Stance, which also helps him a lot in his ultimate, because he does lose magic resist and armor when he uses ultimate, but now with Death Stance he'll be able to block more AP damage and also AD damage, which means that you'll be able to survive a lot more when you're in your ultimate. Xin Zhao as well as a bruiser, again very similar to other bruisers, still a very strong champion to play, can still be a great carry in team fights. Viego now builds full crit. You completely skip Trinity Force completely. You build Essence Reaver instead, because Essence Reaver has the new Spellblade passive. You now can't build Essence Reaver and Trinity Force in the same build, but with Viego now you go full crit. You go Bloodthirster, Collector, Mortal Reminder, Essence Reaver into a flex last item, which could be like Death Stance, for example. Very, very strong at the moment. Is an insane carry. Like, Viego is a crazy strong carry at the moment. I've already mentioned how Bloodthirst is a very good defensive item as well as very good offensive item. When you build this on Viego, you gain the lifeline shield and you do a ton of damage as well at the same time. Amumu is still very strong, not as strong as what he was before, you know, after his nerfs and everything as well, but Amumu's still a great champion to play and is still a great tank, like Nunu, which offers a lot of crowd control and is very good against melee champions. Nocturne's still one of the best snowballing champions in the game. With his ultimate, he can do a lot to get around the map. He can make a difference in team fights. That darkness makes it very scary every single time that I play against Nocturne. The lights go out, darkness arrives, and it just becomes very, very scary. So Nocturne, definitely a very scary champion to play against. And also with items like Duskblade, he can jump in with his ultimate. He can use all his abilities, one-shot someone, and then he turns invisible with Duskblade, making him very difficult to lock down. Kindred buffs were actually very, very nice. So we got Kindred buffs in patch 6.2, but we also got the rework of all of the crit items. So Kindred now can either build Trinity Force or Essence Reaver. I like Trinity Force a little bit better because you still get the attack speed with Trinity Force, but Essence Reaver is another option you can go. You have the improved Magnetic Blaster, you have Bloodthirster, which I spoke about already. So you're seeing a lot of these crit junglers being a lot more powerful now, like Kindred, like Viego, like Yone as well. A lot of these champions are starting to come into the meta because crit items are so damn powerful at the moment. And Riven, the last champion to talk about in the S tier. Honestly, this champion probably deserves to be an S+ tier with how much mobility she has, how much carry potential she has. But again, kind of similar to, who was I talking about in the Baron lane? Kind of similar to Fiora in a way. The Riven is very difficult to master. She's very difficult to kind of get used to, and also be able to know where to dash at what time. So Riven stays in S tier just because she's not the easiest champion to play, but in terms of carry potential, Riven definitely deserves to be up there in S+ tier. Moving down into A tier, Master Yi, again another another champion that builds crit items now, and also he got a buff in patch 6.2a. So Master Yi might be a bit of a sleeper pick right now. It's very easy to play, is very easy to carry with. There isn't a lot of skill involved when you play Master Yi. You just build crit items and you can be a great carry. With the buff to Master Yi, I still have to play it. I will be streaming a little bit later on today. I will be playing the likes of Master Yi to see if he is going to be much stronger or not, but we'll have to wait and see. But Master Yi in general still stays in the A tier as a strong champion in the meta. Pantheon as well in the jungle. When you're building First Strike now, you can go for Dustblade. You can turn invisible when you one-shot someone. Again, it's like Dustblade having that invisibility is so powerful for a lot of these assassins, making it very difficult to try and lock them down. It allows you to reposition around fights, which is very strong. Rengar now also builds crit. Rengar now builds Essence Reaver first item. You deal so much extra damage now with Essence Reaver. It is absolutely insane how much damage you can do now with Rengar building crit. So crit Rengar definitely back in the meta, and also very strong at the moment as well. He's one of the most difficult champions to lock down because he just goes into a bush, jumps around, and he's just one-shots everyone basically on the map. Diana, pretty good with Yordle's Infinity Orb. Again, another AP alternative. I don't think there's a lot of really AP junglers at the moment that are very strong in the meta. You know, the only AP junglers that I would really recommend to play is like Warwick and Lilia, but there are still some decent champions in A tier that you can also play as well. Diana being one of them, with Yordle's Infinity Orb being very, very powerful. Kha'Zix also got a buff in this patch. Nice buff as well. Base armor is very good for the early game to help with skirmishes around Scuttle Crabs. More damage on his passive and more damage on his first ability. So again, with Yordle's Dustblade for assassins being very difficult to lock down, you turn invisible when you kill someone, and you can also turn invisible with your ultimate. So you could be invisible now for a good 2 to 3 seconds when you kill someone with Kha'Zix. So again, very annoying champion to play against, and is also going to be a pretty strong pick this patch. Fizz still works pretty decent in the jungle. Jungle clear speed is pretty good. Infinity Orb again also being very strong. Lichbane also a very strong item as well. Can still be a great carry to play. Graves also with the crit items. I've definitely shifted him up and definitely put him up in the tier list for sure. With again Bloodthirster being the strongest crit item at the moment with survivability, but you have Collector as well, which allows Graves to snowball in the early game. Evelyn also with Protobelt plus the Yordle's Infinity Orb buff. Both these in general are just great items for Evelyn. With Lichbane on top of that, Evelyn now actually feels like she does more damage. She also got a buff, I think just before 6.2, which has definitely helped her out a lot as well. But now she's a lot more of a viable champion in the jungle. If you want that AP champion, if you want that invisible champion, especially in lower elos, Evelyn is absolutely great. Hecarim now with Yordle's Death Stance with the new Soralda's Grudge is also very powerful. You can also go Glory Enchant to get 30% move speed for free, which increases his damage. So in general, Hecarim is still a decent champion to play. Nautilus as well, your one-shot build when you're building him in the jungle with Electrocute or First Strike, any one of these runes, you can build him full AP. You build Yordle's Infinity Orb as well, again, also a very strong item. Zed still very strong in the jungle as well. Can still build the Yordle's Yordle's Dustblade if you want to, and also Yordle's Death Stance to help a little bit with his survivability, but it's still a great champion to play in the jungle. Neela, I mentioned a little bit before as well, just in terms of crit junglers and how much stronger they have become. Neela is one of them as well, which is slowly creeping up in win rate again because of how strong the items are, and because the game is because the first dragons are delayed and the first rift heralds are delayed. It means that these farm junglers like Neela can farm up to that first item, but with the game now being much more faster paced, these farm heavy junglers like Neela, like maybe Shyvana for example, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, are just, you know, they're not reaching into that S and S plus tier yet, because these champions still need, you know, 2 to 3 items to get there, and they're still just going to struggle a little bit. But of course Yone is different, because Yone just gets stronger. Honestly, 1 item, even 2 items, he's already just becomes very strong with how his passive works. But Neela is a champion that needs like 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 items to be that late game carry, but with games being so much quicker, it makes it a little bit difficult. Mordekaiser, the 4 AP alternative where you go phase rush, is still very viable in the jungle, can still be very good. Poppy jungle now slowly creeping back into the meta as well. With Yordle's Death Stance, you can now go for a more AD carry style for Poppy, building items like Trinity Force, Sunderous Sky, and Yordle's Death Stance. So you're less of a tank, but you're more of a carry, dealing damage. So Poppy slowly coming back into the meta as well. Fiora jungle also still very good right now. A lot of mobility, a lot of damage in general. Fiora jungle, not as good as the Baron lane, but still can be a viable option in the jungle. Fiddlesticks, I want this champion to be good, and I love how this champion plays, and I just love Fiddlesticks playstyle with how low vision is, and how much less vision there is in Wild Rift compared to League of Legends. It's so much easier to use Fiddlesticks ultimate and use it as a surprise tool. The problem is Fiddlesticks early game, he just gets invaded early on, and it's just very difficult to try and actually farm up with Fiddlesticks in the early game and get to that point where you're level 5 and you can actually, you know, run around the map and gank any lane that you want to. If people know how to play against Fiddlesticks, they know that you just need to invade him early game. He's one of the weakest early game champions, and you just put him behind in the early game. So that's what you need to do against Fiddlesticks, and that's why Fiddlesticks, in my opinion, stays in A tier and doesn't move up to S tier. Echo as well, also a pretty good AP option that you can play. The same with Gragas as well. Both of these AP assassins are still very strong for obviously different reasons. Gragas has its ultimate, which can displace enemies and, you know, crowd control enemies for a long time. Echo can jump in and do a ton of damage and then ultimate away to safety. Morgana, I did originally have an S tier, but I've actually moved down to A tier. I'm a bit like, I don't know. I'm a bit like back and forth with Morgana at the moment. There are some scenarios where I feel like she can be really good, but I just think there's a lot better carry champions at the moment. I think Morgana is definitely a lot better in this meta, especially with Yordle's and Liandry's being buffed. I still see people make the mistake of building Ludens and Bandle Fancy on Morgana, which is not the way you should play her. You should play her with just Liandry's into Rylai's. I did originally have her in S, but I moved her down into A because I think, like, if you look at the S tier champions, these are all great carries that can completely 1v9. Some of them can 1v9 games, and some of them are just great bruisers and great champions to play in general. Morgana is more of a supportive jungler that doesn't really have that carry style unless you land your abilities, but obviously is very skill shot reliant. So that's why I moved her down into A, but she's still a strong champion to play though. B tier is more of the unique champions that you can play in the jungle. A lot of these top laners, Baron laners that can be played in the jungle. Champions like Darius, who can still be played in the jungle if you want to play him in jungle. Not very strong though in general. Volibear also not very strong at all in the jungle compared to in the Baron lane, but can be a viable option. Trendemir as well, again, not viable in the jungle, but a lot more viable in the top lane. Just remember now that Trendemir a long time ago got a nerf to his passive, I believe it was, or something changed with like Trendemir's damage to jungle, so he doesn't do as much damage to jungle camps anymore. KO, again, more of a Baron lane or a mid lane champion, doesn't really get played too much in the jungle, but can still be a viable option if KO can farm up and get a few items. Camille and Irelia, both stronger in the Baron lane, but can still be played in the jungle if you want to. Talon in general is just a very weak champion at the moment. Even with Yordle's Dustblade, hasn't really helped him at all. You know, his damage output is not really there. He can't really one-shot someone. Same with mid lane. Talon is also not very good at the moment. Jax jungle as well. Jax jungle, you can build more AP style now and just build like one-shot Jax with like Nash's 2, for example. But in general, it's pretty mid and pretty okay. Nod jungle, again, pretty mid champion. It's okay. Like his jungle clear speed got nerfed like 2 or 3 times now over the last few patches, so just getting weaker and weaker. Kayn maybe deserves to be higher in A tier. I'm not really too sure. I haven't really seen Kayn too much, to be honest with you. But I think in general, the champion is just not very powerful. And Shyvana, even after her buff, the buff on the second ability is really nice. That is great. But I've mentioned already how Shyvana and just farm champions in general are not performing very well at the moment because the meta has shifted, because the tempo of the game has shifted. The games are now a lot quicker. So it's a lot more difficult now for Shyvana to farm jungle camps and also to get dragons. You know, that delay in dragons from 5 minutes to 6 minutes means that Shyvana can't get a huge amount of stacks now with her passive by taking down dragons. The dragons are delayed, which means she needs to farm her jungle camps more, which doesn't get her as many stacks. And she's just a lot weaker. So even with the buff, Shyvana still stays in B tier and Maokai just never works in the jungle. So that's why Maokai is C tier. Moving into the mid lane, no S plus champions in the mid lane. I will talk about some champions though that I think deserve to be in the S plus tier for sure. I think the S plus tier can be yeah, let me just talk about some mid lane champions. I'm trying to find them as well. That's the question. Syndra, I think, is very, very strong and could deserve to be an S plus tier right now. I think her burst damage with Yordle's Infinity Orb and Awakened Soul Stealer is absolutely disgusting right now. I think she could deserve to be in the S plus tier. I do think all these champions are about the same, but I'm just highlighting a few champions that I think deserve to be in S plus tier. Ahri as well, again with Yordle's Infinity Orb, was already strong in the last patch after a few buffs recently. Was already very strong. I think she's one of the safest and one of the strongest mid lane champions to play, that has the most amount of outplay potential and the best pick potential with her charm. Zoe also very strong as well, that you can play, could deserve to be S plus tier with how much poke damage she does and how much burst damage she can do now with all her abilities. And I think that's pretty much it. I don't think there are any other champions that could really deserve to be an S plus tier. Caston, you could say, deserves to be S plus tier as well. I think the buff reducing her the cooldown of his ultimate from 2 seconds to 1 second was a really, really nice buff. But early game Caston is still pretty weak, and you basically give up a lot of mid lane pressure. So it means that the enemy mid laner can just push the wave and look to roam and make an impact in the early game, which pretty much falls you behind. And as I said, with the tempo of the game, if one team gets an early game lead, it's very difficult to come back from that, just because how much gold you get now from towers, from inner towers, and just from objectives in general. They're the champions that I think could deserve to be an S plus tier, but I think all the champions have their different strengths and different weaknesses as well. I'll talk about the other champions now. Orianna, very good control mage to play in the mid lane. Again, with the Yordle's Infinity buff, if you hit someone with a shockwave and you kill one person, my god, the AoE damage that you can deal with this champion now is absurd with the new Infinity Orb buff. Absolutely crazy what you can do now with Orianna, but she is a very strong champion to play. Heimerdinger, again with Yordle's Infinity Orb and also Yordle's Leandri's Torment, both very strong items for Heimerdinger, and he's still a great control mage to play in the mid lane. Swain, even though we don't have his rework yet, is still very, very strong. You now can just skip Rod of Ages as an item completely and just go into Malignance, into a full AP version of Swain. And like I said, this is the version before he gets his ultimate reset, before he gets his rework, hopefully in a few weeks time. So with Swain's rework, he's going to get even stronger. He's already very strong with items like Malignance, Infinity Orb, and Death Cap. So I'm very worried to see where Swain is going to land after the rework comes on through. But he is very strong, even with the changes that happened to even without the rework that's happened to him. Aurelion Sol, one of the best late game scaling champions in the game, with Vladimir as well. Both these champions are pretty weak in the early game, but once they get 3 or 4 items, with Aurelion Sol, of course, he's focused more on his stacks and his upgraded ultimate. Vladimir is more focused on getting as much ability haste as possible, so he can keep on using his abilities over and over again and getting a few levels. But both of these champions have insane late game scaling. Once you play against a Vladimir that has 3 or 4 items, he's unkillable. kill. He does the most amount of damage in the game by far, in my opinion, and also just very difficult to shut down. Same with Aurelion Sol. Even when you're behind with Aurelion Sol can easily clear waves with his third ability, with his ultimate, and his first ability. You can stall games as much as possible, and then wait until you get your upgraded ultimate and make a huge AoE damage in team fights. And he's still a great pick champion in the mid lane. You do a lot of damage now with Protobelt and First Strike with her ultimate. So very strong pick champion to play in the mid lane. Ryze as a control mage is also very powerful still. Again, more of a late game champion like Vladimir and Aurelion Sol. Doesn't do as much damage as Ryze, as Aurelion Sol and Vladimir, but can still be a great champion to play. Aurora. Wow, I've gone through this whole tier list and I haven't even spoken about Aurora yet. I think this champion is very strong. I just don't think people know how to play Aurora yet. I still think there are ways in which you can play this champion that people don't know. Like, people don't know that you can reactivate your ultimate to stop the AoE slow and to stop that field. I see a lot of people using her ultimate and actually playing it correctly, where you walk behind you use the teleport to get towards enemy champions, but then they're using abilities, they're forgetting that their third ability knocks Aurora back, and then they teleport to the other side again by accident. And this happens the other way as well. You know, you're trying to escape from champions, but then you're not using the ultimate again to close the field down, so you're just walking back in the field and you're teleporting back to enemy champions. So in general, I think this champion is very strong. The burst damage of this champion is absolutely absurd. Like, she does crazy damage when you get a few items, but again, it's just a case of people not knowing how to master and how to play the champion yet, which is why I think she's still pretty low on win rate and people still can't carry with her, but I think it will just take time overall. Zyra, kind of the surprise pick of this patch, in my opinion. I think that a lot of people might be surprised to see Zyra in the same tier as all of these other champions, but with the buff to Liandry's Torment, Zyra is now a very, very strong champion to play in the mid lane. She is very difficult to deal with anyway, with her plants and her poke damage, and with how safe that she can farm up and do damage. But now with the buff of Liandry's Torment, she just becomes even more annoying to play against. And you can still go for like Liandry's as well, and you can build more of a utility style, but the damage of Zyra is very, very powerful. So that's why she sits in the S tier, as, like I said, the surprise pick, really, I should say, of this patch. Victor in the mid lane, still a very strong scaling champion, still does a lot of damage, of course, with his upgraded abilities are very powerful. And Lissandra also moves up into the S tier as well, with Awakened Soul Stealer and Infinity Orb being very strong item combo at the moment. Lissandra sees herself in the S tier as this huge AoE damage assassin that can be very annoying to play against. Twisted Fate. Twisted Fate can also be pretty good. I think with the change to Magnetic Blaster, it's kind of difficult now, because Twisted Fate actually liked to build Magnetic Blaster before, but now the item gives AD, you're kind of incentivized to move away from the item. ADTF is also not really a thing, so now you just build full AP burst damage TF. You're not going to have the extra range anymore with your gold card, but you can still make a big impact with your ultimate, and you can still do a lot of damage in team fights. Fizz is still a viable pick as well in the mid lane. Your early game is a little bit weak since you are a melee champion, but if you can roam, if you can use your Chum the Waters, if you can use your assassin style aggressively, then still a great champion to pick. Kennen, I was also tempted to move up into the S tier because of this whole Protobelt thing, because of her ultimate, and because how strong, as I mentioned, the Infinity Orb plus Awakened Soul Stealer combo is at the moment in the game. I was tempted to move Kennen up, but she is going to stay in the A tier just for now. But I am tempted to definitely move Kennen up, because I think that Kennen is a great carry at the moment in the mid lane. Vex with her reset mechanic is also still very powerful. Again, with Awakened Soul Stealer plus Infinity Orb, you can do huge AoE damage when you kill someone with your ultimate, which can be very strong for her reset mechanic to get enemy champions lower on health, so you can jump around and do a bunch of damage. Zed mid lane also still very good. The assassin style as well that you play in the mid lane. You can now play Eclipse with Zed mid lane, which doesn't really give you that much in terms of armor pen damage, but it does do % health damage, and it does give you the shield. Helps you a lot with survivability in the mid lane as well, so that's why Zed is pretty decent in the mid lane. Kayle mid lane, I think, is her strongest role at the moment. I think because of how much shorter the lane is compared to Baron lane. Barrel lane also gets dived much easier as well. Like junglers find it a lot easier to dive in the top lane or the bot lane instead of the mid lane. Mid lane is a lot harder to dive because, like I said, the lane is shorter, the distance between turrets are a lot shorter as well, and also you need to walk in between the enemy. You need to walk in between the turrets as well. You need to walk in between the two turrets, and also you need to walk through your jungle or through your jungle to actually get to the mid lane. So I think Kel mid lane is probably her best role, but again, pretty weak early game champion, but can still scale and be very strong. Akali mid lane I still think is her best role, but I don't think she is like as powerful at the moment. In the mid lane, I still think that she struggles a lot in the early game, and her damage still isn't really there at the moment, but I still think she could be pretty good. Ziggs as well, also pretty good control mage. You can sit back, use your abilities, actually does a lot of damage at the moment, and with tower platings now being a little bit weaker, you can now get towers a lot quicker in the early game because the tower platings fall off earlier, but also you can do more damage to get tower platings because now your abilities do more damage to do damage just in general to towers. Now you can now get tower platings much easier. Wave clear is still pretty good, and just in general the champion is strong. Brand with Yordle's Liandry's, very strong champion, has a lot of burst damage, but the weakness of Brand is that he doesn't have any mobility in a way. He doesn't have any way of escaping any sort of dives from all of these assassins and bruisers that are very strong at the moment in the current meta. But if you can be the one, if you can be the aggressor in team fights, and if you're the one pushing forward, then you can do a lot of damage with like your ultimate and other abilities as well. Galio, when you're playing this full AP style, when you're playing items like Infinity Orb and Awakened Soul Stealer, can be very strong with Electrocute as well. Again, pretty much a hidden pick this patch. I think Galio can be very strong with all of his burst damage and the champion in general being very powerful. Morgana mid lane, again, I think the reason why this champion is not really doing well at the moment in terms of like win rates and everything is because people are just building Ludens and Bandle's Fantasy. But if you just build Liandry's as a first item, I think this champion is actually very strong. The reason why she's A though, she's more of a supportive mid laner. She's not really a carry in the mid lane. Kind of the same with Lux as well. I think actually Lux has probably more carry potential than Morgana because the Lux has a lot more burst damage. But Morgana with like a black shield and her ultimate is more of a supportive champion rather than a main carry. Echo mid lane is still very annoying to play against. Has one of the quickest and easiest mid lane wave clears of the entire assassin pool at the moment. With Echo, you just use your first ability, you auto attack a few times, and the whole minion wave is gone. Sometimes you actually clear the mid lane wave quicker than some AP champions, some AP mages, which is absolutely disgusting. Like, I played Aurora against Echo once, and Aurora, as you might know, has pretty decent wave clear with her first ability and her third ability. But when you play Aurora against Echo, Echo can just Q and just auto attack a few times and actually clears the wave quicker than Aurora. So that's why he's very strong, and he can use that advantage to roam around the map. Yone, I actually don't think is as strong in the mid lane as what he is in the barrel lane and also the mid lane. I think, again, as I mentioned, with kind of this melee matchup that you have at the moment, Yone has a little bit more of a difficult time playing in the mid lane because you need to make sure that you're passive early on. You can't really roam and get an advantage. You know, in barrel lane, you actually have a pretty decent outcome most of the time against these bruisers because you have the shielding with your second ability, and also your first item Bloodthirster just makes you pretty unkillable against most of these bruisers. In the mid lane, you might have a much more difficult matchup, especially if you're against other ranged champions. Same with Yasuo as well. I think Yasuo actually got stronger in the mid lane, but again, because of this range versus melee matchup, it makes it a little bit difficult to play. But I think Yasuo is very strong with the crit items. Irelia as well, again, same scenario. I think Irelia is one of the best champions though to play in the mid lane if you're playing these AD bruisers, because Irelia can stack up her passive so quickly, and she has a lot of mobility jumping around with minions. She can jump onto enemy champions quite quickly, stack her passive, stack Conqueror, and do a lot of damage. Katarina, I think, struggles a little bit. I think with all the crowd control that's in the game at the moment still. Repulsor is a little bit weaker now, so you can't just build Repulsor as a counter to Katarina, because the Katarina has a few seconds to be able to escape, or just like half a second or a second to escape, because there is a time difference now with Repulsor. It's not just instant knock away. But in general, the champion can still work. You know, you still have great carry potential if you can roam, if you can get ahead early game. She's one of the most difficult champions to lock down, but there's so much crowd control in the game that it can be pretty easy at the same time. Veigar scaling is very good, but as I mentioned already, with the game now being much more faster pace, I think Veigar in general is struggling a little bit to help with, wave clear and just help in terms of damage output. But if the game lasts more than 15 minutes, then Veigar becomes very strong. But with most games not even lasting up to 15 minutes at the moment, you don't really have enough time for Veigar to scale and get enough stacks from his passive. Teemo mid lane, like I said, probably the best role at the moment because it's a shorter lane and because you can make full use of your invisibility. Also, champions a lot squishier in the mid lane. You know, these mages, for example, you can take full advantage of. Whereas in top lane, you might be playing against some bruisers that go like Eclipse, or they might go more of Malmortius, and it might be a little bit of a struggle. But there are no mid lane mage magic resist items that can help you against champions like Teemo, which makes Teemo pretty annoying to play against. B tier, I think Corki and Lucian as AD carries now, and even Akshan as well. I think AD carries in the mid lane, they should be stronger, you know, quote unquote, they should be stronger in the mid lane because of the way the meta is going right now, because crit AD carries are very strong. But also you have to think that even though crit AD carries did get stronger, a lot of these mages got items like Infinity Orb and they still have much better wave clear. And in general, AD champions are actually weaker in the mid lane because of the wave clear as well. If you remember a change that happened in the mid lane, all of the mid lane minions got weaker in terms of HP, but now they have armor. So it's a lot more difficult now for these AD champions to clear in the mid wave. So you don't get priority anymore in the mid lane. You might be struggling a little bit against some of these mages, and also your scaling isn't as strong as some of these mages as well. So that's why Akshan, Lucian, and Corki sit in B tier. They're still viable. You can still play them if you want to. You can probably still make them work, but they're just not as strong. Jace I mentioned already, but the champion definitely needs a buff. He's not that strong at the moment at all. Pyke, I think, is a lot better as support. Pyke mid lane is not really a thing anymore, but you can make it work if you try and want to. But again, mid lane wave clear is not as easy as what it was before for AD champions, so you might find it difficult to roam. Gragas is a lot better in the jungle because you can make a lot more plays and roam around the map and make more plays and do a lot more damage. And Karma is a lot more of a supportive champion in the mid lane. Same with Seraphine as well. Seraphine and Karma are very similar, where they're a lot better as a support, and they're much weaker if they build for AP damage. And Talon as well, sitting in the C tier, I've already mentioned, but I don't think Talon is very strong at the moment in the current meta. In terms of AD carries, I did have Misfortune in ES Plus tier. If a lot of you kept an eye out on my social media, you did see that I did have Misfortune in ES Plus tier. But my god, Misfortune got one of the biggest nerfs to her passive I've ever seen of any champion. It went from like, what was it? Like, it went from 40 or 45 base damage down to 35. And now, instead of scaling with 75% of your bonus attack damage, it now scales with 30% of your bonus attack damage. So your passive now is a lot weaker than what it was before. And also they nerfed her first ability, so now you don't do as much damage with the ricochet, and you don't do as much damage when you're poking enemy champions during the laning phase. So Misfortune did move from S plus tier down to S tier, but she was very strong before patch 6.2a. I was originally going to make this tier list video today anyway, but I was very surprised when yesterday there was a new patch. But in general, Misfortune did get a little bit weaker, but still S tier champion, can still be very powerful, and you can still do a lot of damage with your ricochets and your first ability, and it's probably one of the best laning phase champions to play at the moment. But sitting in the S plus tier, even after all of these crit item changes, all of the meta changes, everything that has happened in Wild Rift in 6.2, Corki is still the king of the top lane. His build, though, has completely changed. You don't build Manamune anymore. You don't build Trinity Force. You just go straight for Essence Reaver as a first item, and you build full crit. You go Essence Reaver, Bloodthirster, Magnetic Blaster, Mortal Reminder, and then a flex last item. And this full crit Corki build does a crazy amount of damage. Your auto attacks are doing so much damage right now that you are just completely carrying any game at the moment. Very, very strong champion to play, and is by far the best AD carry to play right now in the current meta. Ezreal would be S plus tier, but the thing is now with Ezreal is that with all of these crit items being changed, I think Ezreal still does a lot of damage, but with all these crit items being changed and a lot of the crit items being buffed, Ezreal is one of the only AD carries that actually doesn't build crit. So she is actually, in general, a lot weaker now, because crit items are very powerful, like Bloodthirster and Essence Reaver, but Ezreal not building crit, even though his crit build can be viable, but it's still not strong at the moment, unfortunately. You still build Manamune and Trinity Force. Because of that, Ezreal is still sitting in S tier, but could be S plus tier if some of the crit items do get nerfed. Samira, if you play duo Q and if you play Samira with a tank support, or even if you just play Samira in general with a tank support and you trust that support to engage, Samira can just run over an entire game. This champion is crazy right now in terms of damage. You have more damage now with Collector and you can snowball the game pretty much out of hand, but now you have insane survivability with Bloodthirster. Getting that passive shield, getting that lifeline shield means that you have so much more survivability, but you can still do a crazy amount of damage now with Samira. You have Infinity Hedge, you have Immortal Reminder, and if you want to, as a last item, you can build another crit item and exceed above 100% critical strike damage. And then you're just going to like E into a team fight, use your ultimate. You have so much healing that you're not going to be able to do... Champion's not going to be able to do enough damage to you. And if they try and one-shot you, you have Bloodthirster's shield to save you anyway. So Samira, very, very powerful. Zeri rework, I think, is pretty underrated. I actually rate this champion quite highly at the moment, especially when you still pair her with an Enchanter support. I still think that Zeri is very powerful. I think she's a lot less focused now on dashing in and using your ultimate. You can play her more of a peeling playstyle now. Her first ability is now pretty good for last hitting minions in the laning phase. Her third ability can do a lot of damage now and also comes off cooldown a lot quicker. As I mentioned before, with Essence Reaver and Bloodthirster also being very powerful, I think Zeri is actually pretty decent in this meta. Lucian is an absolutely disgusting champion at the moment. Essence Reaver, Bloodthirster, again, Essence Reaver first item with Lucian, and you do crazy damage. Lucian already did well before with Solari Chargeblade, but now they move Solari Chargeblade into Essence Reaver, and the item gives AD as well. Like, it absolutely disgusting. Lucian is crazy, crazy strong at the moment, especially played with like Nami, but just in general, you can play Lucian with any sort of support and you'll be very powerful. Jhin, I think, is also pretty good as well. I just think his damage output against tanks are still pretty weak. You know, you can still play against some tanks that are building a lot of HP with Heartsteel and Sunfire, and you are going to struggle against these tanks. And also, you don't do a lot of consistent damage. With Yordle's Death Stance being a very strong item as well, you are... when you're playing against champions that build Yordle's Death Stance, they're taking a lot less burst damage. So you are a lot more of a burst damage AD carry that focuses a lot more on crit, a lot on your fourth shot, and a lot on your ultimate and your abilities. But with Yordle's Death Stance being a very strong item, it does mean that these burst heavy crit champions are becoming a lot weaker. Well, I say a lot weaker. Jhin is still strong. I shouldn't really say a lot weaker, but just weaker in general. You know, if Yordle's Death Stance wasn't in the game, for example, Jhin would easily be S+ tier. Like with the build that he runs, Blaster got a buff. A Collector got a buff as well. Infinity Edge is very powerful. Mortal Reminder is very strong. And then you can build a last item like BT is also very strong as well. Like you can build last item BT, and that means that you have over 100% crit and you benefit from the new IE passive. I do have to say, though, that because Jhin... Also, another reason why Jin's not in S+ tier as well is that he doesn't build Bloodthirster. He builds Collector, Magnetic Blaster into IE, so he actually is a lot more squishier than the other AD carries. You think of all the other AD carries in here as well, except for Ezreal. Bloodthirster, 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 Bloodthirster. All these champions build Bloodthirster, which is by far the best crit item in the game right now. Xayah, very tempted to move her up into S+ tier, but I will keep her in S tier for now. I'm so tempted to put her in S+ tier. I mean, a lot of you will probably know that I'm a Xayah main. I think this champion got a lot stronger this patch because of the Navori Quick Blades buff, even though they did nerf that you don't get your abilities up as often, but it now increases your ability damage. So your third ability, when you pull back the feathers, does crazy damage now. Like if you use your ultimate, you auto attack a few times, you get out a lot of feathers. When you pull them back, with Navori Quick Blades, insane amount of damage. Really, really great champion to play at the moment in the current meta. So they're also pretty good as well. Again, Navori Quick Blade still being very powerful. You can still do a lot of damage on your abilities. You're still a very safe AD carry to play that you can sit in the back line. You have your Spell Shield, which is very powerful, and your ultimate, which can speed up allies quite a lot. And I already spoke about Miss Fortune, but she's still very strong at the moment. Moving into A tier. Some of this might surprise you, but I'll explain to you why I think these champions deserve to be in A tier. Jinx, I actually don't think is very strong at the moment at all. I think you're so stuck on building Runa's Hurricane because you want to... I haven't tried Jinx without Runa's Hurricane. I do want to try it though, because I think that a lot of people are just stuck on Runa's Hurricane being like Jinx's item because of the spread damage, which is right. Like you need spread damage. You need to, you know, try and help with her passive. Trying to get takedowns, but in general I still think Jinx is locked behind Enchanter supports. If you play this champion with tank supports, you are so useless. You don't have any mobility. You can say that just in general Gale Force will help you with that, but in general, like Jinx, I don't think is very powerful at all. Caitlyn can be very good, but I think just her damage output is not as high as the S tier champions. But I think Caitlyn, with her increased range and how much damage she can deal, she has the potential to move up into the S tier eventually. Kai'Sa now has a crit build alternative, which is now her best build. Same with Vayne as well. I could talk about these two champions at one, actually. Vayne has now a crit build with Bloodthirster. Kai'Sa now has a build with Bloodthirster, with this item being by far the strongest item at the moment. But the problem with these two champions is that, as I mentioned already, the game is very early game centric. The game is very much based on snowballs in terms of taking towers early game and trying to get ahead in the early game. With champions like Kai'Sa, you need 3 items. Vayne, you need 3 items. And sometimes the game finishes before you can even build 3 items, because the enemy AD carry is playing someone like Miss Fortune or Samira or Lucian or Jin, you know, all of these early game champions, Corki as well, that spike off 1 or 2 items, Xayah as well. Because you're playing against a lot of these early game champions, these later game champions like Kai'Sa and Vayne are going to take a lot more time to scale, which means the game is pretty much over. You know, the tempo of the game, like I said, very, very fast paced at the moment. That's why both these champions are in A tier. But once you get like 3 or 4 crit items, both these champions are very, very strong. Both of them can use Essence Reaver, both of them can use Bloodthirster, benefit from a lot of the attack speed, and it's just very powerful. Tristana, again, the same thing. I think Tristana actually benefited a lot from this patch, with Bloodthirster again helping the survivability, and also Navori Quickblades increasing the damage of her 3rd ability. But I think in general, the problem is with Tristana is that she takes just too long to scale. Same with the other AD carries as well. Too long to scale and just doesn't really do too much. Varus, you now build more on hit, but on hit builds right now are very, very weak. So that's why Varus is sitting in A tier. The champions still can have a lot of carry potential. You build like a mixture of on-hit / AP, actually. I say it's an on-hit build, but it's more of like on-hit with like AP. But in general, with crit items being very powerful, this build is not very strong at the moment. It can still carry games, and it can still be pretty good with his passive. But in general, he's sitting in the A tier because I just don't think he's that strong. Draven can be very good. I think Bloodthirster helps him. The Draven's a weird champion because ever since the durability patch, he has struggled. Even though himself got tankier, he also struggled to kill champions. And it's kind of the same now as well with Bloodthirster. Bloodthirster, he builds the first item. He now has more survivability, but because all these other AD carriers are also building Bloodthirster, he now struggles to kill champions. So he struggles to snowball in the early game, and he struggles to get kills early on to make full use of his passive. So that's why he's sitting in the A tier. I still think you can probably get ahead in the early game. He still does the most amount of damage of any other AD carry, but again, he still kind of struggles. And Ashe, I still need to play Ashe a little bit more. I still need to play more with her build and also with Soul Transfer, because I think this is one of the best champions with Soul Transfer. But the reason why she's not in S tier is, again, I feel like Ashe is still more of a utility AD carry. I don't think her first ability damage and also a passive damage buff really actually made her more of a carry. But I do still need to play her more, and I might need to fiddle around a little bit with her build to try and find the best build for her. But I still think she can carry games. I still think she's good. That's why she's in A tier, but she's not as strong as the other carries in S tier. And then there's a huge gap. There's no one in B tier, and then C tier are just the absolute god-awful champions that you shouldn't play. Neela bot lane just doesn't work. She's a lot better in the jungle. You just completely avoid her at all. Kalista still didn't get her AD buff that she should have got like a few patches ago. Still didn't get that for some reason, but hey, she's now one of the worst champions in the game. And the same with Twitch as well. There is a new Twitch build that's circulating around where you go like Collector, Runa's Hurricane into like Mortal Reminder. You build more AD crit, but I've seen it like once. I played against it once, I think, and it just didn't look very good at all. But I might need to give it a try. But this build is also very strong because you can go the new Yordles Leandries. And then finally, we have support. Support at the moment. Let me get rid of this. Curries, yay. Finally, in the support role, supports in general haven't really changed at all. We had the change to Yordle's Harmonic Echo, which is very, very powerful at the moment. But in general, the meta of supports didn't really change. I did want to put champions in the S+ tier, though, because I think it's very difficult to have some supports in the S tier, or like so many supports in the S tier where there are just some supports which are much stronger than others. And then them two supports are Nautilus and Zilean. Zilean I ban in every single one of my games unless my support picks it. Zilean and Ambessa are my 2 permabans this patch. Zilean is the most annoying champion to play against. Even though he's been nerfed like 2 or 3 times, he's still super annoying. His ultimate is just completely broken. You can win in a 2v2 bot lane, and then suddenly, oh, the champion comes back alive. You actually don't get the kill, you don't get the gold, you don't get nothing. I've wasted all of these abilities, I've wasted all of my summoner spells, and I don't even get a kill for it. He can also use this on tanks and bruisers in the front line, making them also unkillable as well. He has crowd control in his kit, he has movement speed, he has shielding, he has an AoE slow that can slow projectiles and champions. The champion's just completely out of control at the moment, and he still is one of the best supports to play right now. Nautilus as well, I think with the buff that happened a few patches ago, I was a little bit hesitant with Nautilus, but I do think he is the best tank support to play right now. His crowd control is great. He has very easy crowd control as well with his ultimate. His second ability is very powerful to help you get advantages and help you get wave control in the mid lane or even in the bot lane. Nautilus, very strong tank, does a lot of damage, has very easy crowd control. That's why Nautilus is sitting in the S+ tier. Moving down into the S tier, Blitzcrank is still a very strong champion to play against enchanters, but doesn't really work against tank junglers. So that's why Blitzcrank is not S+ tier anymore. Whereas before, like, Blitzcrank was in a world where he was sitting in S+ tier because he was very powerful against tank supports and also enchanter supports with how much damage he did. But if you're against enchanter support like, I don't know, Karma, Seraphine, Lulu, you can pick Blitzcrank and you can snowball and get a lead in the early game. Karma, I think, is a lot better built as an enchanter at the moment rather than 4 AP. Her enchanted or upgraded or whatever you want to call it, what's her... I can't think what her passive name. Mantra, that's the one. Her Mantra third ability, her upgraded version that does the AoE shielding, is absolutely insane on Karma. You use this with Harmonic Echo, you use it with Ardent Sensor, and you know, anything else like Staff of Flowing Water. Everyone that you're shielding also gets the advantage as well. They all get the Ardent Sensor buff. They all get the Harmonic Echo buff as well. So it's very, very, like, Karma playing as a support is very strong, and also has a lot of utility and a lot of crowd control as well with her abilities. Pyke is still the best carry to play in the support role. There are champions like Senna, Bran, Swain, and etc. like Zyra that can still be played as a carry, but Pyke is better than all of them. You have Hook, you have great reset mechanics with your ultimate, and you're still very powerful. Seraphine is still very good as well. The AoE shields, the AoE healing as well, with Harmonic Echo being buffed, with Ardent Sensor being stronger with crit carries, also very good. Lulu, you build Ardent as a first item. The reason why Lulu stays in S tier is because Ardent Sensor got so much stronger with these crit AD carries. When you play Lulu with someone like, I don't know, Xayah, Severe, Zeri, any of these crit AD carries, like, you crit now with Ardent Sensor, you do crazy amount of damage. Maokai is still a pretty underrated support with Ornn as well. I can talk about these two champions at the same time. Maokai and Ornn are very, very underrated right now. In terms of tank supports, they have probably some of the most utility and the most crowd control out of any other support in the game. Ornn, of course, you can use his passive to use it on your AD carry, so that AD carry can buy items wherever they want to on the map, which is so OP that a lot of people underestimate how powerful his passive actually is. His ultimate is very powerful. He has a lot of crowd control. He has a lot of presence in lane. Same with Maokai as well. That team-wide ultimate with his team-wide ultimate, AoE ultimate, is very powerful in team fights. You can also lock down a champion for a few seconds with your ultimate, plus your second ability, and then your first ability afterwards. So two very underrated tanks. Rakan's buff is absolutely huge. Rakan buff is so massive in 6.2. I think he's already very strong carry to play. There are a few different ways you can play Rakan. You can play him either with Electrocute, full AP, full burst damage, and be the main carry on the team. Or you can build Glacial Augment, build a little bit more tanky, but you build more hybrid, where you build tankiness and also damage, where you go for items like Yordle Trap to try and snowball in the early game, Zeke's Convergence, and after that you build items like Anti-Shield, Crown of Shattered Queen, and Awakened Soul Stealer. So that's the build that I recommend, the more hybrid style for Rakan. But I've tried 4 AP Rakan, absolutely crazy, completely out of control. Nami also very oppressive in the bot lane. Nami's damage and Nami's healing with her second ability, with also Harmonic Echo getting buffed, by the way, she actually does the most amount of healing compared to any other support in the game. And on top of that, she can also bounce her healing and deal damage at the same time. She has great crowd control with her first ability and her ultimate, and her third ability can also slow, making it easier and allowing you to deal more damage, or your AD carry, I should say, to deal more damage. Yumi, I still think is super overrated. Like, this champion is really not that good at all. I don't think this champion is near enough as good. I think it's only good if you're playing duo queue with like a jungler and the Yumi just sits on the jungler the whole game. You just basically completely ignore the bot lane. But because you're playing basically 1 versus 2 in a bot lane, the AD carry has such a hard time. Like, imagine playing like I don't know, playing against Zyra Khan or playing against like Nautilus Samira, and then you're just sitting there, your AD carry is sitting there and Yumi's on top of them. Like, Yumi can't do anything. As soon as Yumi jumps out, and if she tries to jump out and walk up and auto attacks, she just gets crowd control and she dies straight away. So that's why Yumi is sitting in A tier. She can work if you're playing duo queue and if you're playing with a jungler that can hyper carry, but other than that, she's not that strong. Zyra with the Liandry's buff is actually stronger now as a support in terms of a carry support. I still think Pyke is better, but Zyra can still be played more of a carry support and can be very, very powerful with Liandry's Torment and Rylai's. Alistar with his headbutt pulverize. I was going to say Hextech pulverize there for a second. Headbutt pulverize. Can still be very strong in fights. It's still very tanky and offers a lot of crowd control. Same with Thresh as well, as the tank support. It's still also very powerful with the crowd control and the early damage that he can offer. Singed is a bit more of a unique pick with Nunu as well. Again, I can talk about these two champions at the same time with Nunu and also Singed. Both these champions are very unique picks, but they're also very powerful picks as well. Singed with the flip back, being able to stun enemies in the pool is actually very, very powerful. And also you can just keep doing this for utility and team fights, or crowd controlling team fights. Nunu as well is super underrated as a support, but only really works against tank supports and really struggles against enchanters. But if you're against the tank support, then Nunu is the best counter to that. Sona is also very powerful with the AoE healing, the AoE shielding. Sona can still be a great champion. Lux, kind of same with Zyra, is more of a carry support, but it's not as strong as a champion like Pyke, for example, but can still work if you want to play this one-shot style with Lux. Janna has a lot more peeling compared to other supports. You know, you have your ultimate, you have your tornadoes, you have your speed up with your second ability. So it's very good if you're against a lot of these bruisers or assassins that are trying to jump onto your AD carry. That peeling can really help you out a lot in team fights. From also very good against a lot of melee champions and very good for peeling in fights. Very good against tank supports as well that want to walk up and do a bunch of damage. You can just auto attack them, start stacking your passive, and you could do a lot of work. Jarvan, again, kind of like Singed and Nunu, bit more of a unique pick, but Jarvan can be very powerful as a support. The lockdown with his ultimate is very powerful. You have very low cooldown with your third ability and your first ability. And since when you put your third ability down, your AD carry also gains a lot of attack speed. So you're playing more of this buffing style with Jarvan that can just engage and do a, you know, have a crazy amount of crowd control and just be very annoying in general. Soraka doesn't do as much healing as some other champions in the S tier, but can still work pretty well. But I do think I'd much rather prefer to have like a Sona or a Janna or even Milio, which I'm talking about next. Milio's attack range is very powerful, but this champion can be locked down very easily. When you're when you're playing against a Milio, you just need to focus Milio. If you focus Milio, then this champion cannot use ultimate on himself unless he builds Quicksilver, and then you just one-shot him. You one-shot the Milio and just becomes completely useless. But if you stay back with Milio, you can give your AD carry extra range, you give him a shielding, you can also use your ultimate as a cleanse on top of the Veil enchant as well. Milio can be very, very powerful. Leona with the crowd control, also very powerful at the moment in the current meta. Again, more of a tank support that has the perfect engage. And then B tier is more of the unique supports, or even more unique, I should say. I think Jarvan, Nunu, and Singed are the champions that are more unique. They're better in other roles, but they can still work as a support, and they're still pretty decent as supports. But B tier are just champions that you just cannot play. The only real champion to talk about here is Senna. I don't think Senna is very strong. She still kind of goes the same build as before. You can build more of a crit orientated Senna build, but you actually don't really do that much damage. But Senna in general is pretty weak. But all of these champions are better in other roles. You know, Swain is a lot better in mid lane, but can still work if you want to in the support role. Brand also can work as a support with Liandry's, but is a lot better in mid lane. Same with Morgana with mid lane and jungle. Amumu a lot better in jungle. Galio a lot better mid lane, and Poppy a lot better in in top lane and jungle. So just a lot more unique unique supports that can still work, can still be great carries, but might struggle a little bit if you're running into them in the current meta. Oh, big deep breath. That is everything. That is all the run through at the moment for the champion tier list. Over the next few days, I will be going over the item tier list and rune tier list, which has also been updated as well. All the new Yordle items are on these builds. All the runes have been updated as well to keep on track of all of that. So I will do tier lists of all of them as well, talking more about the items, where the meta is looking at the moment, and how you can take advantage over this meta as well. But in general, I think the meta is pretty open. I think there are a lot of OP champions that are just insta wins every single time. The champions in the S plus tier, for example. But there are a lot of S tier champions that you can still pick up and do a crazy amount of work on. But hopefully you enjoyed this video. Again, as always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next wild video. Peace.